Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friday Apocryphal Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything Friday Apocryphal and podcast. And boy, do we have a show for you today. Today, we are covering Jubilees chapters 13 through 15.
Yeah, that's the good shit.
Woo!
And I have
I'm like Ric Flair in here.
Ooh, wow.
With the woos.
I was thinking more Little Richard.
Oh, okay. A little different than what I was going for, but okay.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Well, I have the Hermannea translation, Jubilees, by James C. Vanderkam. So do you.
You know what? Yeah, I also do that. I also do have that. And, although I have the Hermannea commentary with the translation, but it's also by James C. Vanderkam.
Incredible.
Yeah, and in fact, those are the only things we really we have volume 2.
Asimov's Guide to the Bible.
Yeah, but we're not going to be using that.
I'm going to be referencing it like once, probably.
Not today.
It's not in the Bible.
Oh, that's right.
This is Jubilees.
Yeah, this is Friday Apocryphal Podcast.
Yeah, seriously.
Sorry.
Come on, Chris.
Also,
I could still use it, dude.
Yeah, I guess.
If you get Genesis stuff, I can go look at it.
As perhaps a paperweight.
Yeah. Oh wow, you're so helpful.
We've almost outgrown that commentary. It only goes 1 through 21.
Yeah, it does. And you know what? Luckily for us, we also have volume 2 of this commentary.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Is it as big?
Yes.
Wow.
It's exactly as big, actually.
Exactly the same.
Well, no, okay, fine. Maybe not exactly, but really close.
Okay. Big enough.
It's more or less the same.
Wow.
Yep.
That James C. Vanderkam. Yep.
Wrote a lot.
Consistent. Super consistent.
We read through some of his commentaries before.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's hop into this then. Anything you want to say about chapter 13 before we get started?
Let's see. Chapter 13. I don't think there's anything specific. Actually, you know what? There is something to say here. I know. Crazy, out of left field. The material that Dillman is a scholar included in Jubilees 13 overlaps with and considerably abbreviates Genesis 12:4 through 14:24. Verses 1 through 16 picture the arrival of Abram with his small band in the land that the writer actually calls Canaan, as in Genesis 12:5, though he believed it was a misnomer because Canaan and his family had stolen it. In verses 1 through 9, one reads about Abram's travels within the new country, his building an altar in the area of Shechem, and his eventual journey south to Hebron and beyond. And one of the things about Canaan, I would say it's a little bit of a misnomer in a sense. Or maybe not a misnomer, but I would say that our modern term, Canaan, is not like super descriptive because it was just kind of a general term that was used to describe the people that were in the land before the Israelites. Mm-hmm. And then, more recent studies that have been done showed like really pretty big diversity in how the religions were over there. Yeah,
well, even, I mean,
So I'm just saying that the term's a little bit outdated, so we should know it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was reading Enema Elish, and there's, like, so many variants of it.
Sure,
because of how many, like, you go one town over, and they completely replace the god names with their local god name. But it's still the same thing, right? But I imagine that was pretty common throughout the ancient world.
I mean, there were, I would say it was fairly common. Yeah, there were lots of gods worshipped in many places, but then the name and their function would slightly change. Like you can say like Yahweh of Samaria or Yahweh of Taman, I think was the other one. Yeah, I think that was the Kuntalet Adrud inscription. I think those were the two names there.
All right. Well, so we're in chapter 13. This is Abram's travels and military adventures. All right. Abram went from Haran and took his wife Sarai and Lot, the son of his brother Haran, to the land of Canaan. He came to Assur. He walked as far as Shechem and settled near a tall oak tree. The Ethiopic manuscript offers several unusual words that appear to be combinations of habaders near an oak. Okay, so it means near an oak tree. He saw that the land from the entrance of Hamath to the tall oak was very pleasant. Then the Lord said to him, "To you and your descendants I will give this land."
And of course, that's, setting up the whole multitude of nations thing.
Yep. He built an altar there and offered on it a sacrifice to the Lord who had appeared to him. He departed from there toward the mountain of Bethel, that is toward the sea, with Ai toward the east, and pitched his tent there. He saw that the land was spacious and most excellent, and that everything was growing on it. Vines, fig trees, pomegranates, oak trees, holm oaks, terebinths, olive trees, cedars, cypresses, incense trees, and all kinds of wild trees. And there was water on the mountains.
Well, that is important for trees.
Yeah.
One of
those.
the notes on verse 5 here about Bethel and Ai. So from the tall oak, Abram moved to a point between Bethel and Ai. You can reference Genesis 12:8. The text supplies largely the same information as Genesis, but does so more succinctly by having only one reference to Bethel rather than two, and by placing the tent clause at the end. So if you compare Genesis 12:8, from there he moved on to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And then if you compare that to what we just read, he departed from there toward the mountain of Bethel, that is toward the sea or the west, with Ai toward the east, and pitched his tent there. Yeah. So they just made it a little bit shorter.
Then he blessed the Lord who had led him from Ur of the Chaldeans and brought him to this mountain. During the first year in the 7th week, 1954.
And it's important to note that it wouldn't have been Ur of the Chaldeans. Yep.
Yeah. On the first of the month in which he had initially built the altar on this mountain, he called on the name of the Lord. "You, my God, are the eternal God." He offered to the Lord a sacrifice on the altar so that he would be with him and not abandon him throughout his entire lifetime. Wow. So Solomon just went overboard, man. And even those Levitical priests, man.
Okay,
you just need one animal to sacrifice, and then God will be there with you for your entire lifetime.
So I think no matter who you are, we can agree that Solomon went overboard. I don't think we needed this to tell us that. I think we could pick that up.
Yeah,
because that was a lot. A lot of animals he sacrificed there.
Yeah. That's the end of that section. Now
that was verse 9, right?
That was the end of verse 9. Yeah, that was the section about Abram's travels to and in the land, presumably the land of Canaan.
Sure. So one of the things here, and I'll just note this, the title for the deity is well chosen because, the title being Eternal God or King of Eternity. And that's from a Genesis text from Qumran, King of Eternity. The title for the deity is well chosen because Abram, in verse 9, after offering a sacrifice on the altar, asks him to be with him and not abandon him throughout his entire lifetime. At this point, Genesis 12:8 says only, "And there he built an altar to the Lord and invoked the name of the Lord." Abram recognizes that the God who reigns for all time is the only one who can guarantee his presence as long as he lives and wherever he finds himself. For the notion of God's not abandoning one of his own, I mean, it says to cross-reference Ezra and some Psalms, but let's be honest, that it comes up a lot.
Yeah, it does. Now we're in another section of famine and the journeys to and from Egypt. Now, you remember this in Genesis, right? There was a famine, and
There's a famine.
yeah.
Okay, no, yeah, let's. I think we all generally remember Genesis.
Yeah.
We remember most things until Chronicles.
Yeah.
And even though it's just
the stories in Genesis are some of the most portrayed in other mediums.
Yeah, definitely. And even though Chronicles is a rewriting of First and Second Kings, those genealogy, the one genealogy, 9 chapters of a genealogy. Oh man, that's just horrible.
Unnecessary.
I don't remember. I barely remember any of that.
Yeah. No, none of that.
And that's it being in spite of the genealogy there.
Anyways, so he departed from there and went toward the south. When he reached Hebron was built at that time, he stayed there for 2 years. Then he went to the southern territory as far as Baalat.
Genesis does not have him go to Hebron until much later, 13:18.
Well, he's noting in this commentary on Genesis that Hebron was built at that time and that he went there.
Yeah, I suppose. The commentary's mention of Hebron leads the writer to cite information about it from another source. During the time the Israelites were in the wilderness, the spies reached Hebron, and the writer then explains Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. That's Numbers 13:22. Jubilees notes that Hebron was constructed around the time Abram came there, and that he resided in it for 2 years.
There was a famine in the land, so Abram went to Egypt in the 3rd year of the week, 1956. He lived in Egypt for 5 years before his wife was taken from him by force. That didn't happen in... He went to Egypt in Genesis.
Yes.
Right? And he said that Sarai was his sister.
Yeah.
In order to avoid that happening.
Right.
So it says...
They're not going to bring that up, that they're related like that, and instead just have him arrested.
They did bring up that he was...
I feel like they did.
They brought it up when they mentioned that they got married earlier.
Yeah, so there's a very good chapter on the whole sister-wife thing. I know, and like marriage contracts, all that kind of stuff. There's a really good chapter on that subject, and especially on those verses in John Van Setter's Abraham in History and Tradition.
Yeah, you should bring it.
I should bring it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you should leave it on that bookshelf over there in case we need it.
Okay.
Anyways. So it's 1956.
Oh my God, it's 1956?
No.
How did I get here?
No, it's 1961.
Oh my God.
Because it was 1956. Then he lived in Egypt for 5 years and his wife was taken from him. Egyptian Tanis was built at that time, 7 years after Hebron.
Yeah, there it is.
When Pharaoh took Abram's wife Sarai by force for himself, the Lord punished Pharaoh and his household very severely because of Abram's wife Sarai.
Yeah, so let's talk about this a little bit. So obviously we pointed out how it's different from the story in Genesis, at least the wording here.
Yeah.
So the reader quickly notices that Jubilees lacks an equivalent of the material in Genesis 12:11-13, where Abram asks Sarai to say she is his sister. This is the first transparent example in the book of protecting a patriarch's reputation. The Abram of Genesis 12 requests that his wife lie about their relationship, which she does. It would be easy to say that the author of Jubilees could not allow one of his heroes to do this, but Jubilees 12:9 had reported that she was in fact his sister. So the writer could have repeated Genesis 12:11-13 without branding Abram a liar.
That's why I found it weird. weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pointed it out.
It is more likely that he preferred not to repeat what appears to be cowardice and self-centeredness in Abram's words in Genesis 12:13. Quote, "Say you are my sister, so that it may go well with me so that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared on your account."
Now, Abram had an extremely large amount of property: sheep, cattle, donkeys, horses, camels, male and female servants, silver, and very much gold. Lot, his brother's son, also had property. Pharaoh returned Abram's wife Sarai and expelled him from the land of Egypt.
Oh, by the way, I think you already read verse 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in
A
verse
while back.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just quickly noting this. So it's spelled in the English Tanais.
Yeah, it says that the Egyptian Tanais was built at that time 7 years after Hebron.
Yeah, but Tanais, or in Greek, Tanais is
Tanais, or in Greek, Tanais.
No. It doesn't have the diphthong there.
Oh.
Yeah. So instead of Tanais, it would be Tanis, actually. Tanis is the Greek name for Zoan in Numbers 13. Yeah.
Okay. So we're at this point. They're talking about all this stuff that Abram and even Lot has. We're going to get to Lot's separation later.
Oh, boy. Lot.
Oh, yeah. Pharaoh returned Abram's wife Sarai.
You know, there are some people who just can't get enough of Lot.
There's a lot.
They like him a whole bunch.
They do.
He went to the place where he had first pitched his tent, at the location of the altar, with Ai on the east and Bethel on the west. This might also be on the sea. A number of Ethiopic manuscripts read "and the sea." He blessed the Lord his God, who had brought him back safely. During this 41st Jubilee, in the third year of the first week, 1963, he returned to his place. He offered a sacrifice on it and called on the Lord's name. "You, Lord, Most High God, are my God, forever and ever." Now Lot separates from Abram, and Abram receives promises. In the fourth year of this week, 1964, Lot separated from him. Lot settled in Sodom. Now, the people of Sodom were very sinful. He was brokenhearted that his brother's son had separated from him and that he had no children. In that year, when Lot was taken captive, the Lord spoke to Abram after Lot separated from him in the fourth year of this week and said to him, "Look up from the place where you have been living toward the north, the south, the west, and the east, because all the land that you see I will give to you and your descendants forever. I will make your descendants like the sands of the sea. Even if a man can count the sands of the earth, your descendants will still not be counted.
Wow.
Get up and walk through its length and its width. Look at everything, because I will give it to your descendants." Then Abram went to Hebron and lived there. So maybe this is why David, when he does the census, it's sinful, right? Because even then your descendants will still not be counted.
Yeah, and then they were counted. Although this would have been written after the whole David thing.
It would have been written long after.
Yeah.
But if that was the implication, right? Because we had some trouble with that. And it could have been then that Yahweh was trying to test David's knowledge and obedience to the law by...
Yeah, but... I mean, yeah, it could just be that same interpretation held for a long time, I guess. Even from, like, the very earliest. There is an interesting note here on verse 17. With these last words of verse 17, he, the author, generally reproduces Genesis 13:12b through 13. Quote, "Lot settled among the cities of the plain and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked, great sinners before the Lord. It is interesting that Genesis 13:12 provides what could have been interpreted as a helpful note by the author of Jubilees. Quote, Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the plain. That is, the text removes Lot, who will not be Abram's heir, from the land of promise and leaves Abram in it. So the note is nevertheless lacking from the book.
Is there a commentary in the first part of verse 19? It says, in that year when Lot was taken captive, the Lord spoke to Abram. I don't recall Lot being taken captive. He left of his own volition.
That's verse 19?
Yeah.
So the promise the promise section.
This is before the promise section.
Okay, so then you're sure it's verse 19?
Yeah, verse 19 starts, in that year when Lot was taken captive, the Lord spoke to Abram after Lot had separated from him in the 4th year of this week and said to him, and then it goes into the promise section, right? But right at the beginning of this verse, it says, in that year when Lot was taken captive. It doesn't make sense because in all of the previous verses and in Genesis, Lot is leaving of his own volition.
Yeah, maybe taken captive by the sinful nature of the place that he is now in.
Maybe it's a little odd though.
Well, I'll tell you what I have for verse 19.
Okay.
The promise section in 13:9 through 21 rewrites Genesis 13:14 through 17, but adheres quite closely to the base text. Genesis 13:14 places Lot's separation before the reiteration of the promises, while Jubilees 13:19 says that it occurred in the same year. See verse 17. That year was also the one in which Lot fell captive to the invading kings in anticipation of the story in Genesis 14 that Jubilees will treat in 13:22 through 29. The wording of the Lord's command to Abram is slightly different in Jubilees. So yeah, that would have been the reference there. It's about something that would have been happening later that he gets into.
Yeah.
And some of these wars, some of the names that we're going into, these are also actually heavily covered in Van Setter's book. But the premise of that work is to demonstrate a around 6th century date for, I'd say, 6th century date for the Torah, more or less.
BCE.
Yeah.
Not 6th century CE.
No. But BC.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really recommend it. He makes some really strong arguments, and he bases some of them in the names of these kings and the places that are mentioned. Yeah. So I highly recommend that. But we can get into that.
Well, now we're getting into arguably one of the coolest parts of Abraham's story. Before he becomes Abraham.
Right.
So in this year, Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Selasar, and Tergal, the king of the nations, came and killed the king of Gomorrah, while the king of Sodom fled. Many people fell with wounds in the valley of Sadimau in the Salt Sea.
Yeah, so lots of stuff to talk about there. So Selasar, for example, there's a textual note here. The Masoretic text reads Elisar. The spelling in Jubilees reflects one well attested in the Septuagint manuscript tradition. It's slightly different variations there.
I'm more interested in Tergal, the king of the nations.
Tergal, the king of the nations. That's just your favorite guy, huh?
Yeah. Is this a kind of like
you have your about emperor. The king of the nations before, remember?
Well, of course we have. Then. We've covered exactly this.
Exactly, remember?
Yeah. So this is like an emperor with sub-kings who are like lords of their own regions, right? But they still pay taxes towards...
This is the guy that rules the emperors. Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy, Tergal, we were going to come back to this at some point.
Then we just kind of didn't.
right? And there's a lot of characters in here, right? So all these kings, first of all, that can give you an idea of when the date might be, if there are any historic kings lists that we can use. But also, like, so they come and kill the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Sodom flees, and then they have this valley of Sodom.
Yeah,
I guess this is where the primary battle took place.
Well, let's talk about some of this stuff, shall we?
Yeah,
I think we shall. So in Genesis 14:1, Shedorlaomer, I'm gonna mispronounce that a lot, so you're just gonna have to deal with that. Is the third king with Amraphel and Arioch listed before him, but in verse 5, Shedorlaomer is the leader, and the others are only, quote, the kings who came with him. And in verse 9,
it makes sense that Shedorlaomer is the third one, because in Hebrew, you go Amraphel and Arioch. Well,
sure.
Right. So the mem is earlier in the alphabet than the resh. So
Okay.
A-M, A-R.
Right.
Then
So they're doing in alphabetical order.
it might have been.
Okay.
I don't know about the entire list.
Sure. Either way. And in verse 9, the order is Shedorlaomer, Tidal, Amraphel, and Arioch. Jubilees understandably avoids the repetition of names in Genesis 14 and recognizes the leading role played by Shedorlaomer. That's what you're going to continue getting.
Thanks, Jubilees, for avoiding repetition.
Yeah, so they're placing.
Well, this is the commentary that is not.
So they're
avoiding
placing
that.
the leading role as Shedorlaomer, but Cheddar Llama.
You know what? We're just gonna go with that.
Yeah,
Cheddar Llama.
So Cheddar Llama has this leading role, but I mean, Turgal is definitely named as a superior political power.
Yeah,
right?
King of Nations is pretty huge.
Yeah.
So either way, so he recognizes the leading role played by Cheddar Llama in the succeeding story by putting his name at the head of the first and only listing of the royal names. The Genesis Apocryphon names them in exactly the order found in Jubilees. In its summary of the longer story in Genesis, Jubilees mentions only the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, not their three allies named in Genesis 14:2.
Yeah, this is in the next verse. I'll just read it. They took captive Sodom, Adamah, and Zeboim. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, captive, and all his possessions. He went as far as Dan. So this is the part where Lot gets taken captive. Right, and that's why Abram got involved in Genesis in this battle between all these armies. Right?
Yeah, and furthermore, you also noted the valley that was mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So Jubilees cuts through the repetitious account to speak about the results of the battle described in Genesis 14:8 through 11. It provides details regarding what happened to the kings of Gomorrah and Sodom, and adds that many people lost their lives in the valley of Sodom. For the reading here, see the textual note. All right, I guess I'll see the textual note, huh? Man, that's
I don't know.
that's
It could
beautiful.
be invisible.
Yeah,
Check it
so
out.
that's verse 22, right? Of course it is. It says it right there. If I could just, get to the
You can do it.
proper page here.
I believe in you.
Oh, thank you. You are just the bestest friend. All right. So the textual note is what? 22D. Man, there's a lot here. I love the commentary, but it does get kind of bouncy. So, wounds in the valley of Sodomau. Okay, we'll go with that. And so in Genesis 14:10, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fell in the valley of Siddom. It seems as if the Ethiopian tradition preserves the place name Sodomau. But the presence of two similar-looking words before it, Ba-Kesel, Ba-Kwalat, that is the best I can do, has led to confusion in the manuscripts. in which some of the letters of these words are written together with the place name as one long and unlikely combination. So that is the textual note on that.
So Siddom.
Yes. And identifying it as the Salt Sea. Jubilees draws on Genesis 14:3, 8, and 10.
Now, I'm not aware, I don't think, prior to this point where these kings attack they attack Gomorrah. Right? I don't think prior to this point there's a mention of any kind of war. Right?
Well, yeah, this would have been described as like I don't think there was a mention to any kind of war.
Yeah,
earlier.
It seems strange that
I mean, of course, Jubilees are passing here.
Right.
So you gotta cut out some of the stuff.
50 minus 1 years? Wow.
Mm-hmm. But it seems strange that, they make a big deal about the first murderer, right? And even in here, they went on about Cain for a little while. But when it comes to the first war, like in Genesis and in here, they mention it, but they kind of glance over it, right?
I think they're just trying to get to the important part of the story for them.
They
this
go.
Was that? Thank you.
Well, they basically go to the. Let me just read this section then. One who had escaped came and told Abram that the son of his brother had been taken captive. When he had armed his household servants, his slaves, Abram went up and killed Chedorlaomer. Upon returning, he took a tithe of everything and gave it to Melchizedek. This tithe was, It's highly likely that most of the words dealing with the encounter between Abram and Melchizedek have been dropped from the text by scribal accident. The text supplied between the brackets here, coming up, is based on readings in a few Ethiopic copies. Okay, this time
which verse is that you're currently reading?
This is in verse 25.
Okay,
where it says Abram went up and killed Chedorlaomer. Upon returning, he took a tithe of everything and gave it to Melchizedek.
Gotcha.
Right, that's all in brackets. For Abram and his descendants, the tithe of the first fruits of the Lord. The Lord made it an eternal ordinance that they should give it to the priests who serve before him for them to possess it forever. This law has no temporal limit because he ordained it for the history of eternity to give a tenth of everything to the Lord, of the seed, the vine, oil, cattle, and sheep. He has given it to the priests to eat and to drink joyfully before him. Very Levitical.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. When the king of Sodom came to him, he knelt before him and said, "Our Lord Abram, kindly give us the people whom you rescued, but their booty is to be yours." Abram said to him, "I lift my hands to the Most High God to show that I will not take anything of yours, not a thread or sandal thongs, so that you may not say I have made Abram rich, excepting only what the young men have eaten and the share of the men who went with me, Awan, Eshol, and Mamre. These will take their share."
So before we hop into the last thing there, I want to just quickly touch on the tithe, the eternal ordinance thing.
So, but before that, I do want to go back to this war.
All right.
This war gets mentioned.
Before that,
Abram says that it says there's a war.
Yeah.
Abram arms his slaves. Abram kills this king, and then he comes back and institutes a tithe. And that's all that they say. That's the entire war.
Yeah, but I guess it wasn't really about the war. So, makes sense.
Well,
they would mention it, right? Because the war is pretty big. It causes a lot of
agenda not to talk about it as much.
Well, yeah, he's trying to get to something else.
He was victorious in this war, so one would think that they would mention it more. But the reason that I would think it would be mentioned more is because this is supposed to be a commentary on Genesis, and in Genesis it was kind of glanced over. So one would think that they would expand on it, but instead,
right? But I guess if you don't have much material to work on, I mean, yeah, I suppose you can.
I'm sure there's like some Mishnah stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure you can, hypothesize about it all you want. But yeah, I don't think it was, about the war, I would say. So that's why it's not really discussed that much.
Yeah.
It just seems kind of like as background information. So either way, so what was I mentioning? Right, the eternal tithe, right?
Yeah, tithe.
Yeah, the tithe in eternal ordinance is ordained for the history, literally generations, of eternity. Another phrase conditioned by Numbers 18:23. It shall be perpetual. Yeah, it shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations. The eternal law is, of course, unceasingly valid and is said to encompass everything: the agricultural staples of seed, vine, oil, and the standard types of animals, cattle, and sheep. Some Pentateuchal passages divide these categories into two types. And yeah, there was a whole division of types and in kinds, perhaps.
Kinds.
You could say kinds. Although it's useless to say kinds. But in the Bible, you could say it describes kinds in Leviticus, right?
Yeah.
I guess. The purpose of giving the tithes to the priests was to support them so they could eat and drink them before him, that is, in the sanctuary. For consuming the tithes, we can just look back at Numbers. Eating tithes joyfully is mentioned in Deuteronomy, but the tithe in that book is different in that the person who brings it eats it together with others in a festive manner.
Right. Here it's just given to the priests.
Yeah, Kugel assigns most of Jubilees 13:25-27 to his interpolator. He attributes part of verse 25 to the author, quote, for Abram and his descendants, the tithe of the first fruits for the Lord. But expressions such as in eternal ordinance and ordained it for the history of eternity identify the remainder of the section as coming from the interpolator. This is a case where he detects the presence of his hand despite the absence of, quote, heavenly tablets from the passage. It was noted above that an eternal ordinance and quote, ordained it for the history of eternity probably derived from Numbers 18:23. There is nothing distinctive about the language of 13:25-27 that would mark it off from the work of the author, who was reflecting wording from the Hebrew Bible, which he, absolutely does. But yeah, just I guess someone thinks it's an interpolation.
All right. Well, that's the end of this chapter. If you're enjoying the stream so far, give us a like, comment, subscribe, share it with all your friends, family, neighbors. Send it to your synagogue leaders. Send it to your church leaders. Send it to your imams. And make sure everyone shares in the bounty of...
Yes, bask in our glory.
Yes, and if you would like to bask at a higher level.
Oh my!
You can donate to Baal, our golden calf here.
Yeah, our good golden calf, our friend.
Yep. And once we hit $666 on that donation drive, of which we're a little bit above 100 right now, right?
I think so.
Oh, we did. We exceeded it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, over 100 now.
So we've exceeded 100. Once we hit 666, we're going to buy a thetan meter. We're going to take it apart. We're going to see who's the most clear. We're going to try and manipulate it. We're going to tear into Scientology. So if you enjoy that, I hope you enjoy that.
Gonna learn a lot about Scientology. That's what you're gonna do. Gonna be here with us for that.
It'll be like a mini documentary.
Yeah,
almost.
So you get a much shorter chapter than I did.
Of course.
Oh, bummer.
Oh no, the trend continues.
So this is a pretty close rewrite of Genesis 15:1. So before you read Jubilees, let me just give you Genesis 15:1.
Okay.
After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great.
Yeah, and the imagery of God being a shield comes up so often. I mean,
Sword
especially
and
in
shield.
Psalms.
I think there's even
Sword, shield,
the
fortress.
prayer about that. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of
Which
imagery
is
like that.
weird because the last game of Pokemon was called that, and they kind of
Sure.
have like an anti-god as the final boss. Which
Okay.
is interesting. I don't know. You know, just a.
I mean, I didn't
weird
play.
trope.
I'm not playing Sword and
Exactly.
Shield.
They don't have
so.
a very good lore in it. That's the best you're gonna get from it, in my opinion.
All right. Well, how about we talk about the Bible and Jubilees?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I just like things that were definitely inspired by the Bible. It's cool to see.
Okay, but swords and shields aren't necessarily Bible inspired.
No, but
they're
the-
common imagery for war.
Sure, but the idea that God is your sword and shield, and like, you know, I don't know, that particular trope is like a prayer and whatever.
I mean, it's certainly biblical.
Sure, it felt like a Christian canon they were going for lore. Is what I'm saying.
Okay, I guess
it's in
I
England.
didn't play it, so I don't know that.
You know.
But
All right, go ahead, please continue.
all right.
Yeah, so there's a bit more here. So this is taking place 10 years after they get to the land,
Okay.
Abram and Sarai. Jubilees 14 and Genesis 15, right? The approximate number of years brings to mind Genesis 16:3. So after Abram lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, and so on. In its brief rewriting of Genesis 16, 14, 21 through 24, the author of Jubilees doesn't reproduce this chronological note. But without mentioning it, he does incorporate it into the information by using a system of dating. By not citing Genesis 16:3 verbatim, he avoids having to acknowledge that the 7 years he attributed to the Egyptian sojourn were somehow included in the 10 years they resided in Canaan. The Genesis Apocryphon solves this problem a bit differently. It includes, in its version of Genesis 15:1, the way in which the Lord parsed the decade for Abram, which is a little different, but basically it leaves out the words in the land of Canaan. So without further ado, why don't you hop into it and show us what's happening in Jubilees?
Yep, chapter 14. Here we go. After these things, in the 4th year of this week, 1964, on the 1st of the 3rd month, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a dream. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your protector. Your reward will be very large. He said, Lord, what are you going to give me when I go on being childless? The son of Masek, the son of my maidservant, that is Damascene Eliezer, will be my heir. You have given me no descendants. Give me descendants.
So in Genesis 15:2-3, this goes, Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, you have given me no offspring, and so a slave born in my house is to be my heir.
Oh, I mean, and yeah, the whole reversal of roles, of societal roles thing there comes in again.
Yeah, so this is how we get into the Ishmael story.
Ah, fun. Don't you love it?
Oh, yeah.
He said to him, This one will not be your heir, but rather someone who will come out of your loins will be your heir. Oh, all right. He brought him outside and said to him, Look at the sky and count the stars if you can count them. He's going to give it a shot. When he had looked at the sky and seen the stars, he said to him, Your descendants will be like this. He believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as something righteous.
I really
I
enjoyed that reading. That was
believe you.
funny.
Yep, so that's that promise again, that the descendants will be numerous.
Dynastic
Yeah.
Promise 75.
Yep.
And it's, yeah, he just kind of, I mean, it is God, so I guess you would take him at his word for it.
Mm-hmm. So this passage in verse 7 that you're getting into,
Okay.
it opens with another direct quotation from the Lord to Abram, and it parallels with Genesis 15:7. So pretty close, actually, 7 with 7. where in Genesis 15:7, God says, I am the Lord who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. So this is going to be essentially repeated. Now, I'll be right back.
Okay, I'm going to say this thing in a very amusing way, hopefully. Okay. He said to him, I am the Lord who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you the land of the Canaanites to occupy forever, and to be God for you and your descendants after you. He said, Lord, Lord, how will I know that I will inherit it? He said to him, Get for me a 3-year-old calf, a 3-year-old goat, a 3-year-old sheep, a turtle dove, and a dove. Oh no, are we gonna see some sort of ritual here? I think that's probably what's gonna happen. All right. He got all of these in the middle of the month. Okay, so maybe perhaps a holiday, a tradition of sorts. Yeah, so he got all of these in the middle of the month. He was living at the Oak of Mamre that is near Hebron. He built an altar there and sacrificed all of these. He poured their blood on the altar and divided them in the middle. He put them opposite one another, but the birds he did not divide. Birds kept coming down on what was spread out, but Abram kept preventing them and not allowing the birds to touch them.
So, I don't know if you mentioned this while I was out, but this bit about where God talks to Abram, and he's like, oh, I led you out of Ur.
Yeah.
So now I'm your God forever. It's very reminiscent of the later Jewish prayers and such, which go, I am the Lord your God who led you out of Egypt to be your God.
Yeah.
I wonder why this tradition of coming out of Egypt and the Moses tradition is so heavily emphasized in Jewish tradition and in holidays, whereas the movement from Ur is not.
Well, because the Egyptians were a bigger problem.
Yeah, but this is like the origin story of the
Perhaps the origin.
The origin?
Yeah.
That was terrible. No more.
Quality content. That's what you're getting here,
I wish
guys.
I had a spray bottle.
You have to discourage him somehow.
Like, you could get a little cup full of coins. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you.
You get one of those.
Anyways, why don't you continue?
Will do. All right, so he's sacrificing some stuff to make this this covenant, I'm guessing. At sunset, a terror fell on Abram. Indeed, a great dark fear fell on him. It was said to Abram, Know for a fact that your descendants will be aliens in a foreign land. They will enslave them and oppress them for 400 years.
So, verse 13, Jubilees wording is very close to Genesis 15:12, but where the Masoretic text, SP, I don't know what SP is. What's SP? It's some other manuscript. Syriac and the Targums say that a deep sleep fell on him. Jubilees joins the textual tradition that understands it as a terror. Septuagint, OL, Ethiopic. So
The Sumerian Pentateuch,
Sumerian Pentateuch.
SP.
All right. So this is a different tradition for what happens here. Found that noteworthy.
But I will judge the nation whom they serve. Afterwards, they will leave from there with many possessions. But you will go peacefully to your fathers and be buried at a ripe old age. In the 4th generation, they will return to this place, because until now the sins of the Amorites have not been completed. The sins of the Amorites have
verse
not
is
been
that?
completed?
Yeah, they have to
What
complete their
verse
sins
is that?
first.
17? 16.
That was 16, yeah.
Okay.
What a
final
strange way
part
to
of the
put it.
unsettling prediction explains why there would be such an extended delay before Abram's descendants would take control of the land. Jubilees follows the text of Genesis, which speaks of the fourth generation as the period of time when they would return to Canaan. The reparation would not take place until then because, for reasons not clarified, the sins committed by the Amorites, one of the peoples in Canaan, had to reach a certain level before they could be displaced.
Yeah, you haven't meeten the sin criteria yet.
I think that would make a little bit of sense, especially considering the flood stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because there was a certain amount of sin that had to happen before God was like, okay, well, I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
So-
but why the Amorites served as the measuring stick rather than, say, the Girgashites or Canaanites in general, the text doesn't say. The name Amorite appears in Genesis 10:16 among Canaan's descendants, while in Genesis 14:7 they're one of the people subdued by the invading kings. Mamre himself is termed an Amorite in Genesis 14:13. That's one of the guys who helped Abram in the battle.
Yeah, and here's the thing about the Amorites. They weren't like, though the word, when it's used a lot, they may have been an actual, tribe. But the word, when it's used, describes so many things, it just kind of seems like a general term.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's one of the arguments that's one of the arguments that's made by Van Setter's.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I really should have brought Van Setter's book. Didn't think we'd be talking so much about these those specific chapters.
Yeah, but also noteworthy, as Jubilees included none of these earlier notes, the Amorites appear here for the first time in the book.
Yeah, because I think they were earlier in Genesis, right?
Yeah, so the first time that they even mention the Amorites, they're just saying eventually they're going to sin a lot, right?
All right. How about we continue here?
Mhm.
When he awakened and got up, the sun had set. There was a flame, and an oven was smoking. Fiery flames passed between what was spread out. So, this could be a pit for sacrificing something. I guess we'll find out.
So there was
sorry,
a special darkness. Okay, so it says there's a lot here, actually. The first part of verse 17 is a plus relative to the base text in Genesis. There, 15, 16 through 17, the narrator inserts no literary break between the divine words and the description of the smoking firepot. In Jubilees, Abram awakes from his sleep and gets to his feet. Kugel comments, in other words, this was no dream. It becomes apparent that some time has passed since verse 13 because the sun has already set. The darkness that forms the backdrop for the fiery scene in verse 17b is therefore a natural one, not one Abram experiences in his sleep, and he is awake for the ceremony confirming the covenant. The Masoretic text, SP, what was that again?
Sumerian Pentateuch.
Sumerian Pentateuch and Syriac have words for a special darkness that engulf the scene. But Jubilees with the Septuagint and its dependents read a term for flame. The flame seems to be in addition to the next item, the oven that was smoking. After mentioning the flames, not the noun is in a singular form, not the torch of fire in the versions of Genesis, it more readily reminds one of the theophany at Sinai. The fiery flames, whatever they included, apparently not the oven, are what passed between the pieces of the halved carcasses. Jubilees uses the word sefache, which was spread out. Another form of the word figures in verse 12, rather than pieces, perhaps to reflect more clearly that Abram had indeed performed a sacrifice. So,
Yeah, sounds like a sacrifice thing. Makes sense, especially considering all the stuff from before and the altar.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's left over, I guess.
Mhm.
On that day, the Lord concluded a covenant with Abram with these words: To your descendants I will give this land from the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the Euphrates River, that of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Phachorites, the Hivites, the Amorites, the Canaans, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So lots of stuff listed there.
Yeah,
Lots
there's
of different groups.
There's a list. So, I mean, yeah, it's a list. Around the Euphrates.
Well, duh.
Jubilees includes the names of the peoples found in the Genesis list,
Okay.
with the exception of the Hittites. It
Ooh.
also mentions the Phacharites and the Hivites, yielding a total of 11 peoples. The geographical image is both expansive and problematic because the huge territory promised to Abram's seed was at present in the hands of many peoples who would have to be handled in some way for the promise to reach fulfillment.
Yeah.
The Amorites are part of the list but do not occupy a prominent place in it, even though their wickedness will mark the time when Abraham's descendants will take the land.
Yeah, I suppose. It passed along, and Abram offered what had been spread out, the birds, their cereal offering, and their libation. The fire devoured them. During this day, we concluded a covenant with Abram like the covenant that we concluded during this month with Noah.
So again,
So
this
he's
is the angel speaking.
Okay.
We did this.
Sure. Abram renewed the festival and the ordinance for himself forever.
The festival. Let's see. That was verse 19. This
The-
is the festival.
Sorry,
of
that was
weeks.
verse 20 actually.
Okay.
And the end of the chapter, probably, since it's so short, right?
No,
Oh, no, really?
they got a few more
Um,
verses.
One few more?
Yeah, exactly. A few more.
Oh, man. Great stalling.
Renewed the festival and the ordinance forever. Jubilees 6 speaks about the festival of weeks, the occasion for covenantal ceremonies in the book and major agreements. It's noteworthy that the festival of weeks on which the covenant at Sinai was made is said here to be a renewal of the festival that Noah had first celebrated on earth, and after him Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But renewal of the holiday also involves renewal of the covenant, as Abraham renewed it along with the festival that was the occasion for it. The covenants and jubilees stand in a continuum, or to put it more precisely, there is a single covenant subject to periodic renewals in which elements, often laws, were added to the earlier formulations. The Festival of Weeks was an annual celebration, and on it the covenant was in some sense renewed every year. See also
Sure.
1QS 2:19 through 23. But on a few occasions, it was reinforced
thought.
and supplemented with new agreements and stipulations or information. The author of Jubilees links the various iterations of the covenant into one grand and evolving agreement between God and his chosen people.
Well, it's certainly easier that
Mhm.
way.
Easier to keep track of.
Yeah, definitely. By the way, this last section here is on Hagar and Ishmael. Yeah, good classic stuff here.
Yes.
Abram was very happy and told all these things to his wife Sarai. He believed that he would have descendants, but she continued not to have a child. That bitch.
Ugh.
Sarai advised her husband Abram and said to him, "Go into my Egyptian slave girl Hagar." Perhaps
Egyptian slave girl.
Yep.
She wasn't Egyptian in Genesis, was she?
I don't think she was ever said
Affirmed or denied
to
any
be
of that.
Egyptian.
What
Yeah.
verse is this? 22?
Yeah, I don't think
I almost
it's
feel like it
said.
was Amalekite. I almost feel like it's nothing or Amalekite.
Yeah, I don't remember it saying anything about the race.
Okay, Jubilees gathers into one place the information scattered in Genesis 16, 1 through 2 about the previously unmentioned Hagar. Josephus does the same in Antiquities of the Jews. The versions of Genesis 16:2 differ in the wording of Sarai's statement about what Hagar's child will mean for her. Yeah, it doesn't mention this, but
Yeah, we can check
I'm
the
gonna
verses.
have to check.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I don't recall her being Egyptian.
Yeah, me neither. I can continue though
Oh, please.
while I do your thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep, it does. It says
It does?
she was Egyptian. It phrases it differently. She had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, and actually, Jason also just posted it in the chat. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. No, I just didn't remember that.
Yeah, I also didn't remember it. I guess we weren't really concentrating on it back then.
I think fact that we're going over it again is helpful for that.
I think the fact that back then we were just kind of reading it and not like analyzing it like this.
Well, we analyzed it a little bit.
We
Yeah,
didn't
but
have
not
nearly
quite like this.
No.
Look at the amount of books that are on this table. I
can-
know that you guys can't see all the books. There are a lot of books.
Yes.
So we got some more on that side of Reuben. We got some more
And a bookshelf.
over here. Yeah. We got a lot. So we're not really looking at the...
There's
got
almost 20 books on this table.
Yeah, we've got lots more resources, and I believe we have a lot more context.
Yeah, definitely. Anyways.
But the racial tensions were definitely not part of our original reading of Genesis.
No, we
At
wouldn't
least
even
commentary-wise, yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, go into my Egyptian slave girl Hagar. Perhaps I will build up descendants. Perhaps I will build up descendants for you from her. Is that how it works?
Sure.
Yeah, it's verse.
Verse
Yeah, that's
22,
still
yeah.
22. Yeah.
I-
Okay, then I guess that works. Abram listened to.
So they paint Sarai as more positive here because she's concerned to produce descendants for her husband and doesn't charge God with keeping her from doing so as she does in Genesis.
Okay. I see. All right, because they weren't. Okay. Wow. Okay. The author here is really pulling at strings.
Yeah.
Abram listened to his wife Sarai's suggestion and said to her, "Do as you suggest." So Sarai took her Egyptian slave girl Hagar and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. He went into her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. He named him Ishmael in the 5th year of this week, 1965. That year was the 86th year in Abram's life.
So Jubilees has she gave birth to a son. The absence of a reference to the paternal side in the Jubilees announcement indicates that the newborn son will not have a significant role in the development of his father's line. The fact that his mother is an Egyptian is also a strike against him. The writer felt no need to include the sections about the poor relations between the pregnant Hagar and the barren Sarai, the banishment of Hagar, her meeting with the angel of the Lord who made a prediction about the child she would bear, or the names she gave to the place of the encounter. Abram names the child Ishmael, but the name can hardly bear the meaning it has in Genesis, where it reflects the divine rescue of Hagar in the wilderness. Genesis calls the one who met her the angel of the Lord, and thus presented Jubilees as narrating angel of the presence with an opportunity to find himself in the story, but he does not do so.
Yeah, and I think that's that year was the 86th year in Abram's life, and that's the end of the chapter.
So Ishmael will appear in several subsequent passages in Jubilees. Abraham will circumcise him so that he belongs to the select group and bears his flesh in the sign of the covenant.
Yeah.
But it will become clear that despite the extraordinary privilege, he was not the chosen descendant of Abraham. Abraham, at Sarah's insistence, will eventually lead him away, and he will become the father of a nation. But Isaac was the son through whom the line and the promises would be transmitted. Yeah, sure. Well, with that, that's the end of that chapter. If you're enjoying the stream so far, like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, family, neighbors, everyone. Get them all in here.
I would love to see your neighbors in here.
Yeah.
Your friend, family, neighbor.
Actually, yeah.
State Farm?
Yeah, Jake. Get Jake from State Farm in here.
Yep.
You know they had to recast him?
Really?
But why?
I think like there was like some, so he was just delivering a line, right? And apparently the joke didn't go over so well. So they replaced Jake from State Farm with like a different guy. And
How would that go over
like the
well?
thing is, he didn't write the script. He was just saying what he had to say.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like an issue with his low voice. It was an issue with what he said. So like, what the fuck what is it supposed to fix?
It fixes everything. He's canceled now.
Okay, when did this happen? Was this earlier this year, last year? Not too long ago.
It's part of
But
cancel
yeah, they had to recast Jake from State Farm because the first guy was actually named Jake. This guy is not named Jake, but he's playing Jake because the real life Jake from State Farm turned into a character that he had to play.
Wow.
And now they are recasting him.
Incredible.
Well,
Right.
The guy must have had too many things be intrusive in his life where they're like, oh man, he's really Jake. Let's get him on that.
Yeah. So this chapter 15, covenant, name changes, and circumcision.
Yeah, the 15th chapter of Jubilees partially reproduces and in part expands the contents of Genesis 17, the priestly story about the covenant of circumcision.
During the 5th year of the 4th week of this Jubilee, 1986, in the 3rd month, in the middle of the month, Abram celebrated the festival of the first fruits of the wheat harvest. He offered as a new sacrifice on the altar the first fruits of the food for the Lord, a bull, a ram, and a sheep. He offered them on the altar as a sacrifice to the Lord, together with their cereal offerings and their libations. He offered everything on the altar with frankincense. Now we're in the covenant of circumcision, name changes, and promises. The Lord appeared to him, and the Lord said to Abram, I am the God of Shaddai.
Yeah.
Please me and be perfect.
Yeah, so El Shaddai is a title that is used for God in the Bible. It's less common.
I've not heard it the God of Shaddai, El Shaddai, as the God of Shaddai.
Yeah,
I've heard it. I've heard it as like a proper noun version of the name, right? El Shaddai,
Yeah.
is a full name, and El being part of the name,
Yeah.
right? But I've not seen it translated as God of Shaddai.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of this stuff a little bit. Although there's plenty of books on the discussions of all the different names. Like one of the classics, Frank Moore-Cross's Canaanite Myth and Hebrew Epic, has just pretty much every chapter is a discussion of names. Let's just be fair here. It's just different sets of names for each chapter. But that's a really great work where he talks about it. So anyways, let's talk about this. Like Genesis 17:1, Jubilees says that the Lord God appeared to Abraham, the first time he introduces a divine communication with him in this way. In Genesis 12:7, the same expression occurred, but the parallel in Jubilees 13:3 used the Lord said to him in its place. The deity identifies himself in Genesis 17 as... go ahead, it's Hebrew. I think this is, El Shaddai, I think, or something close to that.
Yeah, El Shaddai.
Yeah, because I know some of these letters, so
You're getting there.
I'm doing it. For the title, Jubilees uses its standard word for God, followed by the transliteration Shaddai. One of the cases showing that the Ethiopic version of Jubilees is not dependent on the Septuagint, which always renders Shaddai with a suffix, yor, in this passage, or Ethiopic Genesis, which reads, the Lord here. Jubilees does, however, reproduce an understanding of the word walk that is attested in Syriac and the Septuagint. And in the Septuagint, actually, hold on, read that in Hebrew, the word walk right there. Do the best you can do, I suppose.
Het Haled or something like that.
Okay. So then, yeah, that is attested in Syriac and the Septuagint, and the Septuagint has a Euareste, be pleasing, and yeah, Euareste, because of the end of the word there, it means like he, she, or it is pleasing.
So noun is pleasing.
Well, no, just he, she, or it. That specific case. So not they, not we, not you.
Those would be nouns.
Pronouns.
Whatever. Okay, let's just continue. And dependent versions, Ashmer, please, and Ethiopic Genesis 17:1 uses the same word. It is possible that the reading in Jubilees simply reflects a more common understanding of what the word walk might mean in the context.
All right. I will place my covenant between me and you. I will increase you greatly. Then Abram fell prostrate. The Lord spake with him and said, My pact is now with you. I will make you the father of many nations. You will no longer be called Abram. Your name from now to eternity is to be Abraham, because I have designated you the father of many nations.
Yeah, God will make Abram into the father of many nations. God first explains that Abraham will engender a great number of descendants and then applies the information to his name. From now on and forever, the statement about eternity is unique to Jubilees. He was not to be Abram, but Abraham. Repetition of the explanation in verses 6 and 7 serves to underscore the strength and extent of the promise. God reiterates the immense number of Abraham's progeny in verse 8, mentioning again the nations who will arise from him. But he reinforces the greatness of his descendants by noting that kings will be among them. It appears from the use of the same word pair, nations and kings, in Isaiah 41:2, 45:1, 63, Jeremiah, multiple verses there, that they are different expressions for the same point. His offspring will include peoples with their rulers, that is, entire nations.
I will make you very great. I will make you into nations, and kings shall emerge from you. I will place my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout their generation, and as an eternal pact, so that I may be God to you and to your descendants after you. To you and your descendants after you, I will give the words that I just said to you and your descendants after you come from Genesis 17:8. They were omitted when a scribe's eye jumped from the expression at the end of verse 9 to the same words at the end of the restored section. I will give the land where you have resided as an alien, the land of Canaan, that you will rule forever. I will be their God. Then the Lord said to Abraham, As for you, keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you. Circumcise all your males, circumcise your foreskins. It will be a sign of my eternal pact, which is between me and you. You will circumcise a child on the 8th day, every male in your families. The person who has been born in your house, the one whom you purchased with money from any foreigners whom you have acquired who is not from your descendants. The person who is born in your house must be circumcised, and those whom you purchased with money are to be circumcised. My covenant will be in your flesh as an eternal pact. The male who has not been circumcised, the flesh of whose foreskin has not been circumcised on the 8th day, that person will be uprooted from his people because he has violated my covenant.
Yeah, so quite a lot of stuff to discuss there, huh?
Yeah, so obviously genital mutilation is
classic.
No good.
So one of the things that we should probably start with is, the early on in this section here, in verse 11, the Eternal Pact
Mhm.
that's mentioned, right? I think that's verse 11.
Yeah, it goes on through all generations.
Yeah. So that's
I don't think a circumcision was exclusive to Christianity either, though, was it?
Judaism.
Judaism.
you-
Sorry.
The circumcision was an uncommon practice.
Yeah. As a covenant, I don't know of any other religions or cultures that did that, but maybe we just lack that information.
Mhm.
But the practice of cutting off foreskin, that happened in other places.
Sometimes for health reasons.
sometimes for not so much.
Or for like being part of a cult or a class.
Well, okay, so how about so Pharaoh Merneptah, for example, during this battle, he wanted to count how many people he killed, and he just started cutting off foreskins and hands.
Oh.
That's a true story.
All right.
Well, yeah, because you can get a hand from anyone, but you can only get a foreskin
Yep.
from a man.
Yeah.
And they're only having men in their military, presumably.
Sorry, maybe not their foreskin. Maybe it was just their whole dicks. I forget.
Jeez.
But either way, something like that.
Well, didn't David do this?
Yeah, I think David was the foreskin one, and then I'm just getting mixed up. But yeah, Dick getting cut off. I think that's the way he counted. Something like that.
So it's a pretty brutal thing to do to your enemies' corpses.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah. So let's. So yeah, we brought up the talking about Egyptian dead dicks. We brought up the Eternal Pact thing, and that's kind of running along the same theme that we had before about God of eternity, stuff like that. So the author does not reproduce Genesis 17:10a. This circumcising is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Wehrman explains the omission as due to the writer's desire to clarify the text of Genesis, where circumcision is called both the covenant itself, that is, an obligation of the covenant, and a sign of the covenant. In Jubilees, circumcision is a sign of the covenant only. Jubilees 15:11b through 14 largely cites Genesis 17:10b through 14. In verse 11b, or Genesis 17:11a, where both Jubilees and Genesis express the command to circumcise foreskins, some copies of Jubilees and quote all, they add all, so all your foreskins.
Mhm.
Yeah. Perhaps in anticipation of verse 33. In verses 11 through 13, the list of the various types of males in Abraham's household include the same categories as Genesis, with only slight modification in one instance. Every male among you, every male in your families, and they talk about, on the 8th day or 8 days old, slave born in your house, one bought with your money, any foreigner.
Everyone, basically.
Yeah.
All right. The Lord said to Abram, your wife, Sarai, will no longer be called Sarai, for her name will be Sarah. I will bless her. I will give you a son from her and bless him. He will become a nation, and kings of nations will come from him. Abraham fell prostrate and was very happy. He said to himself, will a son be born to one who is 100 years of age? Will Sarah, who is 90 years of age,
If you're getting it on,
give birth to a child?
hold my dentures.
So Abraham said to the Lord, I wish that Ishmael could live in your presence. The Lord said, very well, but Sarah too will give birth to a son for you, and you will name him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an eternal covenant, and for his descendants after him. Regarding Ishmael, I have listened to you. I will indeed bless him, increase him, and make him very numerous. He will father 12 princes, and I will make him into a large nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, to whom Sarah will give birth for you at this time next year. When he had finished speaking with them, the Lord went up from Abraham. So, obviously, 90-year-old women can't give birth or become pregnant after menopause, right? But I suppose that's the miracle of it. So, when they talk about Ishmael here, right, so Ishmael gets his part. But then when they're talking about Isaac, they don't give the significance of the Isaac name because the Isaac means laughter. And they specifically, Sarah's laughter about the concept of becoming pregnant at the age of 90, which is why God tells her to name her son Laughter. And in here, there's no context whatsoever that explains the significance of the naming.
Well, I'll read through this here. So the verse 17 specifically, the verse furnishes a nice example of how the author dealt with a problem in what Genesis reported about a patriarchal hero. According to Genesis 17:17, Abraham, whose strong faith in God's promises attracted attention in 15:6, proved anything but a model of trust after the words regarding Sarah and her son. When God delivered the great promises and blessings in verse 16, Abraham fell
Prostrate.
Prostrate or reverently to the ground. But his next act was potentially troubling. He laughed. The play on the name of his future son is interesting, but what kind of laughter was it? In the context, it seems to be a laugh of disbelief or mistrust that God would supply a biological child to a couple so elderly.
Right. So is this where Abraham fell prostrate and was very happy is where the laughing comes in? Because in the Bible, in Genesis, it was Sarah. And if was very happy is a euphemism for laughter.
So here's some more here. So he laughed because of the joy he felt about the astounding promises God made to him. His delight endows his questions in the sequel with a kinder, gentler tone. With Abraham's reaction of joy at the prospect, he and Sarah would have a son of their own. The lines that follow appear in a new light. He thinks to himself, literally in his heart, about the wonder of it all, that a man aged 100 years and a woman of 90 years would become parents. He does not doubt, he just ponders in amazement. Then, when he actually addresses the Lord in verse 18, he proposes that rather than resorting to a miraculous birth, the deity might wish to work with Ishmael as the one who could live in your presence. The Masoretic text introduces Abraham's words with the particle, I don't know what it is in Hebrew, but it's that yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Then there are a few other manuscript variations. The nuance of the Ge'ez term in the Ethiopic Jubilees, maftu, may be a little milder than the Hebrew. Possibly it is the same, but Abraham's suggestion about Ishmael betrays no doubt on his part that God could bring his prediction to fulfillment. The Lord's response to Abraham's seemingly thoughtful suggestion is a verbatim reproduction of Genesis 17:19. Yeah, and the play on names continues in verse 20.
Abraham did as the Lord told him. He took his son Ishmael, everyone who was born in his house and who had been purchased with money, every male who was in his house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskins. On the same day, Abraham was circumcised. Those who were born in his house, the men of his household, and all those who had been purchased with money, even from foreigners, were circumcised with him. This law is valid for all history forever. There is no circumstancing of days, nor omitting of any day for the 8 days, because it is an eternal ordinance ordained and written on the heavenly tablets. Anyone who is born the flesh of whose private parts has not been circumcised on the 8th day does not belong to the people of the pact that the Lord made with Abraham, but to the people meant for destruction. Moreover, there is no sign on him that he belongs to the Lord, but he is meant for destruction, for being destroyed from the earth and for being uprooted from the earth, because he has violated the covenant of the Lord our God. For this is what the nature of all the angels of the presence and all the angels of holiness was like from the day of their creation. In front of the angels of the presence and the angels of holiness, he sanctified Israel to be with him and his holy angels. So angels are born without foreskins, which is why they chose circumcision as the seal of their covenant.
So yeah, let's talk
All
about
angels are
some
male too, I believe.
Let's talk about some of this
guess.
stuff, shall we? So to this point, Jubilees has followed the content and even the wording of Genesis 17 very closely, but the author felt a need to draw further attention to the importance of circumcision, not to the other topics related in it, such as numerous progeny.
Milwaukee. Okay, I don't know if you did a program on Hezekiah and Senate Cherub, because there's a black pharaoh who's mentioned in the Bible called Taharak. Is that the question you wanted me to read?
All right then.
It's not a
question.
He doesn't know. We went over that.
Did we cover Hezekiah and Sennacherib?
We covered Hezekiah and Sennacherib, yes, back in when we were doing 2 Kings.
Right.
Yeah.
We haven't covered him lately.
Other than in our review of the Deuteronomistic history. That's
right. The Deuteronomistic history review is a very long video and might have what you're looking for.
Yeah, I don't remember going over that pharaoh though.
I don't think that we did. Might be something to look into.
Yeah. Anyway, so the significance of circumcision. So he draws a lot of attention to that instead of other things, such as numerous progeny, so that his contemporary readers would grasp the essence of what it involved and signified. Genesis does nothing of the sort. The sources indicate that circumcision itself, and perhaps aspects of it, were controversial at the time the book was written.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Jubilees deals with Jewish people who fail to circumcise their sons, as well as with those who obey the law of circumcision incompletely. That is, in a way, the author regarded as defective.
Well, of course, if your kid's sick, that doesn't matter because it's a law forever, and there's no circumstance that can change it, right? If your child was born premature, then that's not a circumstance that can change it. If there's no one trained in performing circumcisions, so that, you just have to get someone who will basically blindly and randomly take a scalpel to the phallus, then, nope. There's no circumstance where you can put it off by a day. Has to be on the 8th day.
Yarp.
There's,
otherwise you're supposed to be destroyed.
Yeah, here's some more stuff about this. In this instance, the writer refers to the 8th day provision, but does so in a way that at first seems strange. He prohibits a circumcising of days. Apart from the obvious wordplay, the meaning is debatable, with the translators taking the phrase in two senses. One, it refers to a cutting off of the days, that is, to circumcising a boy before the 8th day. That's what I would think.
Right, which is what they do in America, most hospitals.
Yeah, or the second option, it refers to the law as unending. There is, as it were, no cutoff point of the days when it is valid.
Nice wordplay.
Yeah, right. No Jewish source suggests that circumcising before the 8th day was an option chosen by parents. As a result, it is more likely that the line reinforces the previous clause, that the law of circumcision is valid forever.
Now, you command the Israelites to keep the sign of this covenant throughout.
And I'm also looking more on the angel being circumcised thing. What verse was that? Sorry.
That was
you did
verse
just
27.
drop into here circumcision.
27. Okay.
Circumcising of days. Yeah.
Yep. That's what you're here for. This is the quality content you drop by for.
Yep.
All right, you can keep reading. I'm going to look.
Okay. Now you command the Israelites to keep the sign of this covenant throughout their history as an eternal ordinance, so that they may not be uprooted from the earth. Because the command has been ordained as a covenant, so that they should keep it forever on all the Israelites. For the Lord did not draw near to himself either Ishmael, his sons, his brothers, or Esau. He did not choose them simply because they were among Abraham's children, for he knew them. But he chose He chose Israel to be his people. He sanctified them and gathered them from all humanity. For there are many nations and many peoples, and all belong to him. He made spirits rule over all in order to lead them astray from following him.
Yeah, we talked about the spirits before.
The evil spirits, but that was like a mistake, wasn't it? When it was earlier in the book, these spirits were the results of the dead descendants from the angels, the watchers.
Yeah.
And those dead descendants became spirits who would mislead them. That wasn't something that God created, and it's explicitly something that God punishes.
Yeah. Although, when because I think initially at the very beginning, the Watchers were sent there to do good, and then they did bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
But it's not proper, I think, in the context of the story to say he made spirits rule over all in order to lead them astray from following him.
Yeah, so there is some stuff too. I'll talk about that in just a second. But I did find the thing on angels. And also, Matthew, so the Book of Enoch, yes, it is obviously in the Book of Enoch, all that stuff, but it is referenced in Jubilees very early on.
They like to holler out the book,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the
Shout out to Enoch.
Book of the Watchers is very much a part of Jubilees.
Yeah, and a lot of Judeo-Christian literature.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's touch on the angels being circumcised.
Mm-hmm.
So another important emphasis is that in circumcision, Israel is united with the angels of the presence and the angels of holiness, the two most exalted classes of celestial beings who were created circumcised. Israel also joins with these two groups in keeping the Sabbath, and apparently, and yeah, I remember the whole keeping the Sabbath
Right,
thing.
because these specific angels keep the Sabbath in heaven.
Yeah, so you should keep the Sabbath on earth.
Yeah.
And apparently the Festival of Weeks as well. 6:18, it was, quote, celebrated in heaven from the time of creation until it was kept on earth in the time of Noah. Verse 27 employs the language of sanctification regarding circumcision, as it is used frequently in chapter 2 with respect to the Sabbath. These angels had kept the Sabbath in heaven before it was revealed on earth. They had been circumcised long before the Lord disclosed the law of circumcision to Abraham, and they celebrated the Festival of Weeks well before Noah first learned of it. So that is pretty important, actually. The fact that the Jews are meant to be becoming more like angels, more holy.
Which is weird because
they have to do more things and have more signs.
Yeah, but it's weird because if you read the Quran or you read the life of Adam and Eve or even a number of other apocryphal works, when God creates Adam from clay, he has the angels bow down before Adam. Right? This would imply that... and the reasoning is that because the breath of the Lord was directly given to Adam, whereas it wasn't to the angels, what would imply that human beings, Adam specifically, this is the first human being, is closer to God, is more part of God, is more holy overall, in such a way that the angels are supposed to bow down to him. Here, there's a completely different angelology and a completely different hierarchy.
Yeah. And furthermore, on so the last part that you read there, about the spirits, that we're getting back into.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. So the notion that the spirits or demons, as the two designations seem synonymous, mislead has occurred several times in Jubilees and will recur. But as Deuteronomy 32:9 declares, Israel is the nation that is the Lord's own portion and his allotted share. God made, quote, no angel or spirit rule over Israel, but took the nation as his personal responsibility. The meaning of the divine rule, actually, no, I think that's the end of the demon stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, hold on. No, there's a little bit more. So the meaning of the divine rule over Israel comes to expression in verse 32.
Yeah, I haven't read that yet.
Go ahead, read verse 32.
But over Israel he made no angel or spirit rule, because he alone is their ruler. He will guard them and require them for himself from his angels, his spirits, and everyone, and all his powers, so that he may guard them and bless them, so that they may be his and he theirs from now and forever.
Ah, that's cute.
Like marriage.
Yeah. The meaning of the divine rule over Israel comes to expression in verse 32. The deity will guard them. The verb may be drawn from Deuteronomy 32:10, where it says guarded them as the apple of the eye.
And we had previously a reference to God as a shield.
Yeah. That happens, a lot.
Yep.
He will also require them from his angels, spirits, and powers, much as he requires the life of the person who has shed blood. In 125, God had predicted that every angel and every spirit will know them. They will know that they are my children and that I am their father. Jubilees 15:32 ends with thoroughly covenantal language. They are to be his, and he theirs forever.
I am now telling you that the Israelites will prove false to this ordinance. This is the angel speaking. They will not circumcise their sons in accord with this entire law, because they will leave some of the flesh of their circumcision when they circumcise their sons. Great. All the people of Belial, the worthless people, will leave their sons uncircumcised just as they were born.
Yeah, the next line, all the people of Belial will leave their sons uncircumcised just as they were born, almost certainly aims at a different problem, not circumcising a male at all. That is the implication of saying they would be left as they were born, a statement that could hardly refer to leaving just a part of the foreskin. People who do not circumcise their sons are called the people of Belial. The expression in Ge'ez, Weluda Beliar, the second use of the designation Belial in Jubilees. The books of Maccabees and other sources treating events of the 170s and 160s BCE speak of Jewish people who, by order of Antiochus IV, left their sons uncircumcised. See First Maccabees 148,
which we did cover
when
we
did,
covered Maccabees.
Yeah.
I think that's quite gross, actually. They will not circumcise their sons in accord with the entire law, because they will leave some of the flesh of their circumcision when they circumcise their sons. So not only do you have to get your foreskin clipped off, but it has to be like the accurate amount of...
that was this whole thing about, making sure it was right before.
Yeah, but like that's gross, man. Like, okay, so
you don't want to think about this.
Well, they're getting circumcised. So
God, I can't believe you keep thinking about baby dicks.
Well, they're just encouraging their practitioners to increase the risk of over circumcising. They're saying, "Oh no, you don't want to be like, wishy-washy about this. You don't want to be careful and leave a little extra room there. You want to go all out. If there's even a little bit that's still on there, and you can't wait for that to heal up to determine whether there's too much left there either, because it has to happen on the eighth day.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't even have time to make an educated medical decision.
Well, okay, so you can do it on the eighth day, right? But I'm sure this argument happened a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But so you do it on the eighth day.
I'm
right?
sure it's in the Talmud.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the Talmud probably. So you do it on the eighth day, but then later in life you're like, maybe I want a little bit more chipped off. Like that, would they be mad at that? Because it was done on the eighth day.
Mm-hmm. But if it wasn't done the correct way, then they've already broken the covenant, and they're within the category of people who need to be destroyed.
Okay.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Rabbi Reuben said this. Rabbi Lawrence said this.
Also, that was totally an intentional pun. Ridiculous.
Wow. Thank you.
What the heck? Oh.
Then, there will be great anger from the Lord against the Israelites because they abandoned his covenant, departed from his word, provoked and blasphemed, in that they did not perform the ordinance of the sign. For they have made themselves like the nations so as to be removed and uprooted from the earth. They will no longer have forgiveness or pardon, so that they should be pardoned and forgiven for every sin, for their violation of the eternal ordinance.
Yeah.
That's the end of chapter 15.
Yeah, and honestly, the only commentary I have is that the writer speaks of the ordinance of this sign. The phrase could be rendered the covenant of this sign. When Israel fails to circumcise boys on the 8th day, they leave them with no mark distinguishing them from the nations, from those who belong in the other of the two camps of humanity. The penalties are removal and the now familiar notion of uprooting from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. Classic.
So, that's the end of the chapters for the day. If you enjoyed the stream today, give us a like. Check out our Amazon wish list where you can get books for this table, for our shows, for our future things that we produce.
Yeah, and speaking of which, for things that we produce, later in the week, it would be after Sunday, you're going to be getting a new video. It's going to be on heavenly horsemen. We're going to talk about the visions in Jeremiah. We're going to talk about the stuff in in 2nd Maccabees. We're going to talk about the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Classic.
And the source list for the Quran video is up on Patreon now.
And so is the source list for the heavenly horsemen video.
Yep.
Yeah, so you're going to be getting big stuff soon, so if you want to add...
And even the Quran stuff's coming along quite nicely, I hear.
I finished the first draft. It's going to go through a rewrite and then probably one more rewrite.
Yeah.
And then...
so lots of big things coming up.
Yeah, and then we're starting the Saturday show eventually.
Yeah.
Soon enough. So, Patreon for $1 a month.
Yeah.
You can get all of
Amazon
our
wish list is in the description.
Yes. For $1 a month on Patreon, you can get all of our scripts. You can check out our source lists. I assume that's available to the dollar people.
They are, yeah, absolutely.
Some behind the scenes stuff. For $5 a month, you can get more stuff for $10 a month.
Books. And here's something. So on Sunday, it's going to be the first Sunday of the month. And because it's the first Sunday of the month, we give away a t-shirt. And if you are a $10 patron or more, you get entered into the t-shirt giveaway. You could win a t-shirt.
And if you don't want to mess around with chance, you could always buy a t-shirt on Teespring.
Yeah.
For $20 a month, you get invited to live events if we ever hold them.
Yeah.
And
you're included in the patron hangouts as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for $50 a month, you can be on one of our weekly shows once a month.
Yeah.
We also have Facebook, Twitter. Those are free.
Absolutely free.
And I think that's all the shilling.
I think that is all the shilling.
Well, all right.
All links are in the description. And we will see you on Sunday.
Because I hadn't put that up yet. Keep holding it. I'm trying to find it. There it is. Oh, man. Thanks, guys.
Goodbye.
Oh, jeez.